Okay, so I've been into, health and fitness and, obesity research and research on eating disorders and feeding behavior for a while now. And so I really wanted to kind of start a debate, or not necessarily debate, but a discussion on this health at every size movement, because I've seen it like pretty much everywhere. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people have really controversial opinions on it. So I just wanted to talk to someone about it. So yeah, if you just want to explain what your kind of definition of health at every size is, where you've seen it, and what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, so I first started seeing it just kind of when I started getting into politics, and it was just seemed like it was a new wave of activism within like feminism and intersectionality, and so the first kind of red flag that I saw with it was that it was trademarked.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that there's somebody directly benefiting off its promotion. It doesn't seem like a genuine kind of grassroots movement if somebody is making money off of it directly.
Right.
I think the person specifically who trademarked it is Linda Bacon. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that is a funny last name to have.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, I did also see it brought up a lot in an eating disorders residential program I was at.
Okay.
And it was funny because they typically have dietitians there, and so the dietitians have some of the groups, and there was this one group where a dietitian showed a video which was just basically a bunch of women like getting together and like, oh, just accept your body and just be okay with it. And like they mentioned eating disorders too, but they did it really flippantly. And so then the dietitian started talking about health at every size, and one of the clients there was a binge eater actually, and she said, actually when I gain more weight, I feel sicker. There's more weight on my joints, and I start having these health issues, and I start having high cholesterol, all that. And the dietitian literally said that might be some of the psychological effects of weight stigma.
Oh, wow.
Right out denied this woman's narrative.
That's crazy.
And I tried to bring up aren't there some very extreme weights that just are not healthy to be at every size? And she was like, well, yes, there are health issues associated with either end of the spectrum, but that doesn't mean it's directly caused by the weight. And it's like, well, what else would it be caused by?
Right. Wow, that's so interesting that I didn't know that they were actually using that in like a clinical setting.
Right. That's the thing that kind of concerns me about it,
Yeah.
because you have these ideologies that are infiltrating legitimate scientific or fields that should be scientific,
Yeah.
and because especially with the eating disorder program, they do focus a lot on health effects of the eating disorder because they would just want to make sure they're medically stable enough to participate in the program. And so I'm like, well, what's the point of all that if they think you can be healthy at every size? What's even
Right.
healthy about it?
Yeah, that's the question I would have for them, is that if they believe that, one of the things that I notice about this movement is they're very, weirdly attached to food, and they're very, they love to push eating a lot on people,
Yeah.
They have this idea that, if you don't eat, it's, horrible, and it's just, they have this idea that you just have to, be eating all the time, anytime you feel any pang of hunger, you have to stuff your face, and it's just,
Right.
if they think undereating is so bad, because I think they think undereating is the worst thing you can do, right?
Right.
But why do they not view overeating the same way? Because both, I think, are kind of a form of self-harm and abuse.
Right.
If you're abusing food in a way that you're not eating enough nutrients and stuff, that's bad. But if you're also literally stuffing your face with junk all the time, that's not a lot of what I see is they call it self-care. They're
Right.
oh, have a whole box of Oreos, that's self-care, and it's but no, that's actually self-harm.
Right.
I don't understand that mentality at all.
From what I understand, you can actually be malnourished even if you're eating tons of junk food because you're not getting the right nutrients, not very nutrient-dense food. So you can still be malnourished even if you're really obese.
Yeah. That's actually most obese people.
Right.
Okay, my question to you also was having more experience with like this eating disorder and stuff like that. Do you believe that this movement is harmful, or like, do you think it's harmful to people with eating disorders? Do you think it's helpful in any ways? Just do you want to just talk about that, of what you think about that in terms of the movement's goals and how it affects people with eating disorders?
I mean, just because so much of it is not based in science,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say like maybe it's kind of the same thing I say for religion. Like maybe it helps people feel better
Mm-hmm.
about the situation. But I feel like especially on the binge eating side, it enables some people, which is definitely something you don't want to do in the context of an eating disorder, is to enable their behavior and tell them that it's okay, because that just enables them to be destructive.
I think for people, and like I said, I've done a lot of research on obesity and overeating. I haven't done as much research on. I mean, I understand that binge eating it's basically an addiction, and it's
Yeah.
basically the same as like a drug addiction. And I do agree with you that I think actually the idea of intuitive eating was, like you said, invented for people who had extreme hunger, caloric restriction. And I will say that I have had experiences with extreme. Well, I don't want to say extreme because it was never that extreme, but there was a point in my life where I was restricting. I was being very, very strict about calories. And I definitely noticed that extreme hunger and that kind of desire to overeat, and then when I had a chance, I mean, I think the worst. I mean, it never had it bad, but like I think the worst was like I would eat like 3 bowls of cereal in one sitting or something. It was never really that bad. I've never eaten a lot, so that to me was, quote, a lot of food, but I definitely had that experience, and what pulled me out of having that that cycle of being very overly restrictive with my food was intuitive eating. That helped me a lot, but again, that was it was not severe enough to be an eating disorder, and it was a very short, like it was over a period of like 2 months, like it was over the summer. I was trying to like get abs or whatever. So it was like a very short period, and I was like very strict about my food, and intuitive eating helped me to get out of that. But I think for people who have like lifelong issues with overeating, it's like they eat so to the point where they're so full that I don't even know that they really know what it means to simply eat till satiation rather than eat till I'm gonna blow up.
Because that's definitely something I've seen, like a common thread among a lot of eating disorders, is that you either, or like you somehow, whether that's by overeating or undereating, you ignore your natural hunger cues, and
Right.
where like you don't even know what your natural hunger cues are, because and I think what you're describing is disordered eating.
Yes, not necessarily an eating disorder, right? Yeah.
Sort of a disordered eating.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's different than like something that's more long term or more severe.
Right.
That there's because with intuitive eating, that's to get you to kind of recover from that history. And something I wanted to point out is that from the experiences I've heard with people with binge eating disorder, and this is what kind of makes me angry with the Healthy at Every Size movement, they do not want to have binge eating disorder.
Yeah.
They hate. They can't control themselves around food. They eat until they're like painfully full, and then they feel horribly guilty about it afterward. So they do not want to have this. And so Health at Every Size is basically saying, like, "Oh, you should just be okay with it," you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. I think for the general public, intuitive eating is a good general thing to promote, because I would say most people are probably, like you said, I would say most people have disordered eating habits in this country, in America, either at some point in their lives or ongoing, right? It's kind of inevitable with like the food environment that we do have. It's like a lot of processed food, a lot of like addicting qualities to food, and it's very easy to gain weight. So, I think a lot of people have like, struggle with their relationships with food. And so I think for people who are of a normal, healthy weight, who are not over or underweight, like for example, I was never overweight. I was never even close to overweight. I just wanted to lose like 10 pounds so I could like, see my more muscle definition or whatever. I think for the average person, I do not recommend like caloric deficit, caloric restriction, counting calories. Like I tend to recommend that people who are of a healthy weight stay away from that stuff because of what happened, because of my experience with it. I found it to be really just not like, it was really like not fun. Like I'm not a bodybuilder, but I felt like I was dieting down for a show, but there was no show. You know what I mean? So I think it's a good idea, and this is like I said, is I agree with the movement on that. I'm against, like, I don't like diet culture. I think diet culture is really harmful, and I don't like the idea of like telling people, like, again, I was super into the fitness industry for a while. I think it's really corrupt now. But a lot of these fitness influencers, and they're in really, really good shape because that's their job. A, they have pretty much elite level genetics, and B, that's their full-time job. They recommend to common people, to common folk, to count their calories and their macros, and I don't think that that's natural or healthy to do.
Right, because you get too obsessive.
Exactly. It's super easy to fall into, like you said, disordered eating habits, which for some people can turn into an eating disorder. Luckily, it didn't for me. But I think that's a very harmful idea to promote to the general public. But for people who are obese or overweight, they often, and studies have shown this, they often underestimate the calories they eat by like 20%. So for them to count their calories, just to not necessarily for the rest of their lives, but maybe at the beginning, just to become aware of how much they're actually eating, may be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. So the only binge eating I've really had experience with is like extreme hunger.
Right.
Because you have a tendency to then overeat. That's just how your body reacts to it.
Yeah.
So, and from like reading about the experience of people with different eating disorders online, I found out that people who restrict more have like a totally different relationship with food than people who binge. Or, I mean, with bulimia, it really depends. That is binging, but with purging, it's more complex than.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, like for me, like I don't use overeating as a coping mechanism. I'm more likely to use undereating as a coping mechanism.
Okay.
However, people will just like zone out during it. They will do it to numb themselves.
Right.
So yeah, and I don't really have that experience, but you're into, like you said, you need to establish a healthy relationship with food before you can trust your own tuition and you can trust yourself.
So in terms of, and like just whatever you're comfortable with, but in terms of your recovery, did you implement intuitive eating? What kind of strategies did you use to I don't know where you're at with your relationship with food, but I'm just wondering what kind of strategies or things did you implement, because like you said, you did struggle with extreme hunger. And for me, what helped me was, a lot of trial and error, but I basically implemented intuitive eating and allowed myself to eat till satiety. And then I gained a little bit of weight, and I don't know if you've heard of Stephanie Buttermore. Do you know who that is?
No.
She's like a fitness YouTuber, and she had this similar thing where she's a fitness YouTuber. She was maintaining a very, very lean physique for a very long time, and she struggled with extreme hunger. And so what she did was she allowed herself to eat till satiety, and she found naturally that she was so hungry because she had been so lean that she was eating like 5,000 calories a day, and her weight went up. She gained, I think, like 30 pounds, but now she's down like 11 pounds, and she's like losing weight. And that's actually really similar to what happened to me. is I allowed myself to eat to satiety, and I think I ended up gaining like 10, 15 pounds. But now I'm actually back to the same weight that I was when I was calorically restricting, and I'm actually not restricting at all, which is really funny. But yeah, it kind of went like a bell curve like this. So I don't know if you implemented those same strategies or if it was different for you.
Well, for a lot of me, it was on a meal plan. Like a meal plan for you, it's usually 3 meals and 3 snacks a day, which feels like really overwhelming for me even now. So I have been trying to like move more into intuitive eating just because I don't like how like controlled I feel under a meal. It feels like, especially when there's like times associated with, okay, and you have to eat lunch now. It just feels I really don't like that. I would say intuitive eating has helped me to some extent. It's helped, when I'm not following the meal plan, I still kind of make sure I still eat. And I'm more lenient with like the times of when to eat. Like I said, like, oh, you have to have lunch at noon or whatever. I'll about lunch right now. So yeah, having more freedom with food has definitely somewhat helped my relationship with food. I'm still, in recovery. I still don't totally have a good relationship with food or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, kind of in an intuitive eating versus meal plan, if again, it depends on what your intuitive eating is. Is it like an extreme hunger reaction? Are you intuitively wanting to restrict, or are you intuitively wanting to binge? So I think it depends on like whether your intuitive eating is still healthy in terms of the calorie amount.
Okay.
And meal plans can help if the dietitian is taking care of it and you knowing exactly how much you need to be eating based on your on what your situation is. But again, like I personally don't like being under a meal plan because it feels like people are controlling their every move. So.
Okay. Do you find that helped? Do you find that that's helped establish more normal hunger cues for you, or?
Yes, I would say, because I was just so used to ignoring my hunger cues. But once you start eating regularly again and not like saying, oh, I'll skip this meal so then I can eat this later. Once you're not in that mindset, the hunger cues do kind of generally balance out. Because I've tried like a lot of techniques to try to suppress my hunger cues, but yeah, they have eventually gone to normal.
Okay, that's interesting. So kind of moving on to the next topic. In terms of science, I wanted to discuss whether or not it is possible to be overweight / obese and healthy. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's possible? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it would depend on what metric you're using.
Right.
In terms of BMI, I don't trust that quite as much. That doesn't, for example, count for stuff like sex or muscle composition.
Right.
But if it's general body composition, like body fat percentage, or I'm trying to think of another example, like lean muscle percentage. There's certain ways to calculate that. I think you can be. I think like you can be like a little bit on the overweight side or a little bit on the underweight side, depending on your body type. Like maybe you're gonna have some health consequences, but it's not severe. But once you get into like the morbidly obese or the morbidly there's going to be health consequences inevitably. And it is a little bit different for everyone, because I've heard of people who can have, like, just going on the underweight side, people who can have a BMI of 17 and they're just naturally that thin, and they're still relatively healthy. I know for a fact that I can't, like, even when I start to get in the borderline range, it's unhealthy for me to be on the thinner side. So, and like, or like somebody from, like my dad, for example, he's very big and very muscular. And so I think his BMI is like technically in the obese range, but, it's not completely reflective of his actual weight just because he also has a lot of muscle. So, yeah, so I think you can be overweight and healthy to some extent. However, once you start getting into like obesity, morbid obesity, that kind of thing, then it becomes less likely that you're going to just be able to be healthy at that weight.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I'll just give my thoughts on like the science that I've read and stuff. So, in terms of BMI, again, that's a big talking point for the Health at Every Size movement because they don't like BMI. I think that, like you said, BMI is more accurate for some people than others. I think as a general, measure, it's not a bad measure for the average person. However, like you said, there are some people who, are maybe bodybuilders or are just very athletic and they're very lean, and they're still healthy, but they just, show underweight or overweight on the BMI scale. However, I think for the average person, it's pretty accurate. But I also want to touch on, the different types of fat. So there's subcutaneous fat and there's visceral fat. And then subcutaneous fat is just, the fat that you can then, like, squeeze, right? And then visceral fat is, like, the fat that surrounds your organs. And
Let's interrupt for a second. Visceral fat is, like, the stuff you want to watch out for, right? Because
yes. Yeah. So subcutaneous fat is necessary, actually. It performs a lot of it's our body's energy storage. It helps regulate hormones, things like that. So, I think it's very unhealthy to promote, like I said, a lot of these fitness influencer guys, and this is one of the traps that I fell into, is they promote a very, very lean, shredded physique, 6% body fat, something, crazy percentages like that, which is really not actually optimal for health. I mean, for men, I think the optimal body fat range is like somewhere between 10 and 15%. For women, it's like 20 to 25, something like that. So these very, very these physique competitors who are trying to promote very, very low subcutaneous fat percentages it's a harmful idea, and I definitely fell into that. And I think a lot of young guys are falling into that these days. But regardless, that subcutaneous fat, which, like I said, obviously too much of anything it's going to hold you back. But in general, subcutaneous fat doesn't really do much harm. But visceral fat, the fat that surrounds your organs, is really dangerous. And there's pretty much like a straight correlation, positive correlation between how big you are and how much visceral fat you have, right? I mean, fat is energy, even visceral fat is energy, so the more energy you carry, the more visceral fat you're going to have. And visceral fat is like directly, like, not even just correlative, but like basically causative of many, many, many diseases. So that's the first thing, is that kind of the fatter you get, the more visceral fat you accumulate, and the higher at risk you are for these metabolic diseases, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, and so on and so forth, all the things that people know about. One of the measures for visceral fat is like the waist to height ratio. There's the waist to hip ratio. So people have been kind of looking at those as better alternatives to BMI, because those tend to be pretty accurate. So that's the first thing, is visceral fat. And so that's a very tangible, very simple kind of debunking of the Health at Every Size movement, because the bigger you get, the more visceral fat you have, and the further your health goes down. More visceral fat, it just releases a lot of harmful hormones and chemicals into the bloodstream and into the body. So, they're producing a lot of like inflammatory chemicals and things like that. I don't know the exact specifics, but simple Google search, people. And so that's one thing, and that's a big thing. So already that's already like, all right, debunked by. But the other thing is, I don't know, do you know anything about like the microbiome? Have you heard about that?
I've heard about that, yeah, like the bacteria in your stomach.
Yeah. So the microbiome is basically implicated in pretty much every disease that we have that is known, the microbiome is responsible for the functioning of the immune system. So the microbiome, more microbiome diversity, promotes better health and obviously better control of weight and things like that. So what they found is that in populations in lean, what they found is that lean populations have a different microbiome profile than obese populations. And obese people tend to have a much, much less diverse microbiome than lean people do. And whether this is caused by genetics and then the microbiome is causing them to put on more weight, or if it's caused by their diet, or if it's an interaction of both, likely an interaction of both. But you see right there that because the microbiome is less diverse, that's automatically causing health issues. And the microbiome diversity is a result of diet. So you can see right there that that obese people with a less diverse microbiome are more prone to these diseases, especially, you know, in this time of this pandemic, less able to fight off viral infections because their immune system is not only is it weak, but it's not also it's not regulated well, because the thing with this virus is that your immune system overreacts. So if you don't have a good immune system that can regulate itself, it's going to overreact. It's going to cause all these side effects in terms of like the coronavirus and things like that. So, sorry.
Let me try to pull it up because I saw the craziest article that related to this yesterday. Mm-hmm. It was by like a black man in his 50s who was talking about how he had like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and all this stuff from overeating, and he's like for some reason he was connecting it to his race, and he was saying that like, because I am a black man, I'm more prone to the coronavirus. I have no idea what he was on about. It's weird, because he was like basically saying that he was having these health issues because of his race, not because of his weight.
Yeah, well, I did hear that black people have been getting it more. I don't know the exact statistic on that, and again, I don't know what the reason for that is. It could have to do with like poverty and higher rates of obesity. Yeah, higher rates of obesity in poor populations. So that could definitely be a factor. But yeah, because the microbiome is implicated in not just physical but also mental health, it's been linked to depression, autism, and many mental conflicts. The idea that being obese is correlated with having a less diverse microbiome, and having a less diverse microbiome is correlated with all these other bodily dysfunctions. So right there, you know, those are my two main points I usually bring up, is the visceral fat and the microbiome, and those kind of automatically right there will pretty much debunk any idea that you could be healthy and obese. Yeah,
that makes sense. So is there any validity, because I've had people have kind of conflicting views on this, that do probiotics do anything for your microbiome?
Yeah, so basically what probiotics do is they introduce new strains into your into your gut, which is definitely good. However, in order to keep those diverse strains alive, they must eat something. And if you are taking probiotics but you are eating crap, the bacteria that you've introduced into your gut have nothing to eat, and so they die. So probiotics will do nothing for you if you do not have a healthy fibrous diet. Typically, fiber is what promotes growth of healthy bacterial strains. So
so you have to accompany them with a balanced diet.
Exactly, yeah, with diverse, high fiber, you know, a lot of fruits and vegetables and things like that. So yeah, probiotics won't really do anything for you if you don't change your diet, basically. But yeah. Okay, and then another thing is, have you heard of, I guess we touched a little bit on this earlier, but one of the other main talking points of the Health at Every Size movement is this idea that weight is out of our control, and one of the things that they often cite is the body fat set point, Do you know anything about that?
Well, I mean, I'm just not sure, because I think you might be more well versed in the science of this than I. I personally haven't really read a lot about it, but from what I know, people have, I guess it like your metabolism, because like I have a pretty fast metabolism and I tend to lose weight very quickly. But I know, and I think that this is said as long as when you get older, you have a slower metabolism. Yeah, I mean, so the idea is that that your body weight is going to fall within a certain range, right? I mean, yeah, I do know that there is some validity to maintaining an equilibrium in your eating, and then your weight will balance into a healthy range. But again, that's to do with your eating. That's not going to happen if you're overeating or undereating.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do believe in it to a certain extent, but I think that with the caveat that if you're eating a healthy diet, your body weight will fall within the range that is healthy for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like you said, there's definitely there's genetic variations in body fat levels, body weight. Some people, it's very, very easy for them to maintain a very, very lean physique. And people use the word metabolism. It's really like it's really a lot more complicated than that, because it's really not so much about necessarily because metabolism is just the calories that you're burning on a daily basis. So right. That's based on your height and your weight, really. And so it's not like God was just out here picking people like, you're going to burn 5,000 calories a day and you're going to burn 3,000. I mean, you take someone of the same height, the same weight, the same body composition, because obviously muscle burns more calories than fat. But you take the person with the same height, same weight, the same muscle composition, they're going to burn the same basal metabolic rate. What we do have variations in is what they call NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is like fidgeting and stuff. So some people unconsciously, they don't notice it, they fidget more. And then we also have variations in how well the brain is at regulating overeating. So some people, when they overeat, they take in an excess of calories one day or even over a course of a week. The next week, their body will adjust to be less hungry and to fidget more, to move more, to have more energy. Versus other people, like they did like a twin study. They took all these twins, they overfed all of them by 1,000 calories. Some twins gained 30 pounds, other twins only gained 9 pounds. So you actually see this in real time where you overfeed people, and some people will gain weight more than others because their body doesn't downregulate their appetite or upregulate their movement, right? So in that regard, yes. I mean, like you said, people call it metabolism, whatever they want to call it. There is definitely genetic variation in how easy it is for people to gain or lose weight, and what body weight people will settle at. So there's definitely genetic variation there. But like you said, provided that you eat a healthy diet and you stay active, there's, like you said, there's like a healthy weight range. And some people are closer to the top. They're naturally they're naturally. I mean, anyone can be any weight, because it all comes down to calories, right? But in terms of hunger, right? Like if your body fat set point is kind of up here, and you try to maintain down here, you're going to be hungry all the time, right? So anyone can be any weight they want, but like I was, like you said, some people it's easier to stay along this healthy range. But provided that you have a healthy diet, and by healthy diet I mean calorie-wise, you are staying within a normal calorie range, because a lot of health foods nowadays aren't really healthy. They're packed with calories, right? So a lot of people who are overweight, they complain they can't lose weight. They're eating these foods that are just packaged as healthy, but they're actually full of calories. So
Yeah.
that's another thing is like, it ultimately comes down to calories. I mean, you want to have a healthy diet, but you also want to make sure that your calories are in check. I mean, I have a healthy diet, but I don't eat like 1,000 calories of nuts a day because if I, even though nuts are healthy, I know I would
Yeah.
get fat if I ate a ton of nuts. So, calorically moderate diet and as well as a whole foods healthy diet, you'll maintain somewhere in that healthy range, like you said. So, I guess one last thing I was curious about is what do you think? I mean, I guess like I said, most of my research is done in overeating, but I'm generally interested in like feeding behavior in general. And like I said, just if you're comfortable, my question would be, do you think that there was a specific, do you think that your issues with food were caused by like diet culture, or do you think it was like another something else?
I would say it was probably something else. It did start with adopting like very restrictive dietary habits, but it wasn't really like fad diets or diet culture. Basically, what happened initially was that I went on a low glycemic index diet because I struggled with migraines, and at that point they were very severe. So I was just kind of looking towards anything, and some people were like, "Oh, just try a low glycemic index diet." And then so that meant like, and I took it very seriously. So it meant I was cutting out a lot of things. I was still eating. I was still eating pretty healthily, but like I would not allow myself to have ice cream and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I've actually heard from dietitians that like allowing yourself to have dessert every day, as long as you're not overindulging, will keep you from like extreme hunger later. Because once you're depriving yourself of something, you end up wanting to eat it. But anyway, I was also having like severe stomach pain at the time, and so I was put on another diet in conjunction with the low glycemic index diet, which was like the low. I don't know if you've heard of the low FODMAP diet.
A low what?
Low FODMAP. It's a very specific diet, but it's for like IBS kind of issues.
Okay.
So that meant I had to cut out gluten and dairy as well, and so I was just, for a while, I was just basically eating fruits and vegetables and just like this very limited calorie things, and that was actually when I became underweight. So it did start with a diet for me, but then it kind of, after I recovered from like that severely restrictive diet, and I kind of had extreme hunger that let me get to normal weight again. That was when my restricting became more intentional, and I wasn't on a diet anymore. So I would say that it did kind of start out with dietary restrictions. I wouldn't say they were like fad diets or diet culture, but later it kind of developed into a thing of its own, where I was, using it as a coping mechanism. And I think that's what it is for a lot of people, and that's why I don't really like when people say or kind of imply that eating disorders are just about body image, because it's a lot more complex than just body image. It's like kind of like an addictive behavior, coping mechanism.
Was it for weight? Was it about your weight at all, or was it more just like you just didn't enjoy, like you didn't want to eat for whatever reason?
I would say that there was and still is definitely a weight component to it, because I sometimes see like restricting food as like a sign that you're a self-disciplined person, and that you have a lot of control over what you eat, and you don't give in to the temptation of overeating or eating unhealthy food. So I saw like losing weight as a sign of that.
Okay.
It just became very important to me. Like I have to have this self-discipline. I have to show that I'm kind of, because I didn't really feel good at anything else, so like I have to show that I'm good at something. So yes, weight was a part of it, but it was it wasn't like the main driving force in it, I would say.
So do you think it was a lot about like having control over some, like do you think it felt like you were out of control and you maybe felt like that was one thing that you could control?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And do you think that that's like a common theme in eating disorders?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think one of the things that this health at every size movement pushes is that basically eating disorders are caused by like fat phobia and like weight stigma and like all these things.
Right.
And I kind of question that because like you said, like, yes, it is a little bit about weight, but I feel like a lot of times there is something kind of deeper. And I think one of the reasons that weight gets targeted is not necessarily because people are fat phobic per se, but because weight is something that is largely under our control. Our food intake is something that's largely under our control, and food restriction, caloric restriction, can be a way for us to have control over something, over an aspect of our lives when perhaps other things are going wrong. So,
right.
So,
yeah, I would say that in the whole fat phobia and weight stigma, I feel is like over exaggerated by the health at every size movement. I mean, like I'm not for, just to make it clear, I'm not for like bullying anyone because of their weight. You know, I don't just be mean to people, but like they see like, oh, like they didn't make this certain accommodation for my weight, you know, therefore fat phobia.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't believe in, like, thin privilege or fat phobia, really. I mean, I mean, first of all, I don't really know what fat phobia really means. I mean, obviously do fat people get discriminated against? Like, sure, but, I mean, skinny people get discriminated against. It's definitely not the same systemic type of oppression that, say, racial or sexuality. It's definitely not on that scale at all. It's not like fat people have a history of oppression or anything like that.
Right.
One of the... Sorry, go ahead.
30% of Americans are obese, right? So it's not even like a small minority or anything.
Yeah, and like 2/3 are actually, the majority are either overweight or obese, so it's actually... yeah, so I think, I mean, one of the arguments that they make is that they get discriminated against at the doctor's office, which they think that, I mean, Linda Bacon is one of the people that makes this argument, is that the only reason obese people have health issues is because the doctors don't give them health care or whatever because they're fat, which, again, like, that's absolutely false. Like, Linda actually put out an article or something saying, actually, it wasn't even an article, she just retweeted something that was like, COVID-19, or it was like somewhere in New York, like, people were getting denied beds because of their BMI, and I just did one Google search and could not find any evidence. In fact, I don't think New York ever had to deny a bed to anyone at any point during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has definitely, like, given people an excuse, like, to validate whatever narrative they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I mean, I don't want to get into, like, the whole politics of it.
No, yeah, for sure.
It's just crazy, but, what was I going to say? It kind of reminds me how, like, the whole thing that you were bringing up, that people think that the only reason fat people have health problems is because of society. It kind of reminds me of how people say, like, because I have autism, I've talked about it on my channel a couple of times, and people, sometimes the only reason people with autism have a difficulty with social interaction is because society doesn't accept them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a similar thing, like they're just denying that it comes with real issues, and that, you know.
Yeah. I'm pretty much running out of storage on my computer, but I feel like we had a good discussion. I'm glad I got to hear your perspectives on things, your unique perspectives, and yeah, good talk for sure.